Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out From Merseybeat to Freakbeat, the collapse of the 1960s beat music scene.
In the early 1960s, beat music exploded out of Liverpool with an infectious energy that captivated listeners around the world. Even today, the sound is instantly transfixing, taking you to another space and time. With its catchy melodies, driving rhythms, and feel-good lyrics, beat music brought youth culture to the forefront and set the stage for the British invasion. The upbeat Merseybeat sound soon evolved into the harder, edgier Freakbeat style. But as the decade progressed, this
Freakbeat.
once dominant sound began to give way to a new wave of musical experimentation and complexity. The once vibrant scene eventually becomes unrecognizable as change creeps in. It seems as though the beat music scene that had lifted society up and united people around the world evaporated just like that. So, what is it about beat music that keeps generations coming back to explore the transcendent characteristics of that time? The sound represents a period of togetherness, simplicity, and shared enthusiasm, making it not just a genre, but a cultural symbol that resonates with people's desire for connection.
Did you see the little schoolgirl playing the drums? Look at her go, with those bangs.
Making it not just a genre, but a cultural symbol that resonates with people's desire for connection. The footage and sound from this period is like another world you can travel back to. Join us as we unravel the story of how beat music evolved and soon faded into the era's changing taste during a time of chaos in the rapid evolution of the 60s music scene.
Wow, this reminds me of how brilliant the band name The Beatles is, because they played beat music and they were called The Beatles, with an A, like the word beat. What is the definition? I'm curious. Beat music, British beat, or Merseybeat is a British popular music genre around Liverpool in the late 1950s, early 60s. The genre melded influences from British and American rock and roll, rhythm and blues, skiffle, traditional pop, and music hall. It rose to mainstream popularity in the UK and Europe by 1963 before spreading to North America in 1964 with the British invasion. The beat style had a significant impact on popular music, blah, blah, blah. But to me, it just sounds like rock music. What set it apart? The exact origins of the term beat music and Merseybeat are uncertain. The beat in each, however, derived from the driving rhythms which the bands had adopted from their rock and roll, R&B, and soul music influences, rather than the beat generation literary movement of the 1950s. Okay, so this is not the beatnik stuff. This is Liverpudlians rocking out. As the initial wave of rock and roll subsided in the later 1950s, big beat music, later shortened to beat, became a live dance alternative to the balladeers like Tommy Steele, blah, 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 blah. The Mersey of Merseybeat refers to the River Mersey. Liverpool lies on an eastern side of the river's estuary. The most distinctive characteristic of beat music was its strong beat, using the backbeat common to rock and roll and rhythm and blues, but often with a driving emphasis on all the beats of a 4/4 bar. The rhythm itself, described by Alan Claysons as a changeless 4/4 offbeat on the snare drum, was developed in the clubs in Hamburg, West Germany, where many English groups, including the Beatles, performed in the early 1960s. What do they mean? Do they mean like 4 on the floor? Like a kick drum on every beat? Because I've heard that Pete Best used to play that a lot. The chord playing of the rhythm guitar was broken up into a series of separate strokes, often one to the bar, with the regular plodding of the bass guitar and crisp drumming behind it. This gave a very different effect from the monolithic character of rock, in that the beat was given not by the duplication of one instrument in the rhythm section by another, but by an interplay between all three. This flexibility also meant that beat music could cope with a greater range of time signatures and song shapes than rock and roll had been able to. I don't understand what that means. Beat groups usually had simple guitar-dominated lineups with vocal harmonies and catchy tunes. I think I'm having trouble pulling back from the Beatles and separating that in my mind from what I know of as rock music, I wonder if I could find some examples. It's kind of hard to find it. The word beat is such a general term. Let's see. Maybe they'll play some for us.
During a time of chaos in the rapid evolution of the 60s music scene.
The back streets are how I imagine London looked 100 years ago. Drab, dirty, whose only colour lies in the people. If I was going to make a film on Jack the Ripper, this could be the setting. Because Liverpool was a town that grew up in a hurry and was virtually built in the last half of the last century, it has now grown old. There are reputedly 80,000 slum dwellings, and 30,000 unemployed. This poverty
Whoa.
is another reason for the beat groups. Children have to make their own entertainment.
Oh. I guess this is beat music. Sounds like rock to me. Right? Y'all, even the microphones are dancing.
Before the Beatles rose to prominence, the Mersey area was already home to a vibrant and prolific music scene. Liverpool's access to American rock and roll and R&B records set the stage for beat music. American freedom echoed through the 1950s records of Buddy Holly and Little Richard. In imitation of all things American, working-class youth in particular found a way to transcend their dreary past and what were still formidable class boundaries.
That's interesting. I've heard that in Liverpool specifically, because it's a port city, they would get a lot of American records, whereas I guess, you know, an inland town in the UK would not have access to the same records. It's crazy to think now that music was so physical on records, you know. Crazy.
Transcend their dreary past and what were still formidable class boundaries. Beat music became the great escape. By the early 1960s, over 300 bands were playing in and around the Liverpool area.
300?
This bustling local scene included skiffle groups, rock and roll bands, and R&B acts, each contributing to what would become known as the Merseybeat sound. American records that came in through the Liverpool port made their way through the community by the people bringing them over from the States, eventually into the record stores and to the local DJs. Bob Wooler, a DJ, used to take his records around the local clubs, and the bands like the Beatles would compete to get the newest records to be the first to play them at local spots such as the Cavern Club. Wooler eventually became the DJ at the Cavern Club. Bill Harry, who started Merseybeat magazine, was instrumental in supporting and publicising the bands, helping build the Merseybeat identity as a cultural phenomenon. Merseybeat is a distinctly Liverpool sound characterised by its upbeat rhythms and harmonised vocals. The sound, known for its characteristics of strong 4-beat rhythms and a driving backbeat, Merseybeat was inherently danceable. The bass guitar played a central role, keeping the rhythm grounded and emphasising a fast-paced, toe-tapping beat that invited listeners to dance. Clubs and venues like the Cavern Club, the Iron Door and the Jacaranda provided these bands with regular performance spaces where they developed their sound and honed their live skills.
Oh, that's interesting. So the records would come over to Liverpool from the States, and the bands would learn these newer songs and then compete to be the first ones to play those songs at the Cavern. That's very interesting. This guy's playing that, Do You Love Me? Do you love me? It's different though. It's like there's a white guy aggression to this R&B soul song. Interesting.
Now we have one of the veterans of Liverpool Beat, one of the first personalities on this scene, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, who started 7 years ago.
Ringo Starr played with Roy Storm and the Hurricanes before he played with the Beatles, y'all.
Rory Storm and the Hurricanes
Ringo
were a
back there.
popular group in Liverpool's club scene and featured Ringo Starr on drums before he joined the Beatles.
Well, I can tell by the way that you look at me.
The Beatles hung out with them in Hamburg in 1960 when they were both playing the Kaiserkeller.
Wait a minute. Okay. There's George Harrison. There's Rory Storm. And in the back, laying on these 4 women, is Ringo. What a life Ringo's had. Keep it up, buddy. Keep it up.
This night, Rory, one of my fellow workers, with a piece of toast and the you know, because he didn't want jam on it, he gets quite if his temper's aroused. And so I thought, oh, you know. So anyway, he said he'd give us a lift home. Very friendly, considering, you know. So he left me in Walton Cemetery.
Well, no, you don't.
What? What I just heard this woman say is that Rory threw toast at someone because it had jam on it, and then he told him he was going to take them home, but he dropped them off at a cemetery. Maybe Ringo, I think Ringo made the right choice leaving that band.
When I was about 12, I decided I wanted to be a priest. Well, I tried that for about 3 years, and I discovered women.
A 12-year-old priest? Oh, he tried to be a priest when he was 12, but he did that for 3 years, and then he discovered women.
Do you know the Beatles?
We used to be big mates before we got all famous. But, you know, we still talk to them when we see them, but we don't often see them now. Because, you know, they're always away. But they're great, you know, George is fabulous.
It was the Beatles who were on that night, and the girls had been queuing up all night, and when they got in, there must have been about 700 of them there. The Beatles come on the stage, and the sweat was dripping off the walls, off the ceilings. Oh,
Ew.
the atmosphere was damp, and the sweat must have dripped onto the fuses, fused all the amplifiers, so they couldn't play. So what they done, they got the crowd joining in with them singing, and with just the drums playing, all the girls singing. Then they fixed the amps, they went on, and all the girls, as soon as they come on, all the girls screaming, shouting, pushing to see them, and you just couldn't hear any music, you just saw them. So the girls go home, say to their mother, oh, we heard the Beatles tonight, and matter of fact, they've waited about 10 hours outside just to see them, never heard them at all.
The Beatles came down themselves about 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock, and they were talking to us and signing autographs, and then they went away, and then we sort of all sat down, and some of the lazy ones sort of fell asleep, but the rest of us just kept awake on coffee and dreams of the Beatles.
This is interesting because it seems like the fame of the Beatles blew up the whole thing, because before they got famous, this was more of a contained scene. I guess they were going to Hamburg. A bunch of bands would go to Hamburg, Liverpool, Hamburg. But it seems like the Beatles' success kind of released it to the world, and then it became subject to pop culture, which is very finicky.
A session at the Cavern is underway, and they've got a Manchester group, the Codells, yelling for attention.
Down on my knees and pray that they'd go away, but still they began.
The Searchers formed in 1959 and were one of Liverpool's earliest Merseybeat groups and contributed to the early sound. The Searchers were known for their meticulous approach to harmonies and arrangement. This attention to musical detail set them apart and gave their hits like Needles and Pins and Sweets for My Sweet, a polished sound that helped define Merseybeat. Liverpool's music community was tightly knit, with bands often sharing members, competing for gigs and drawing influence from each other. The success of early groups created a sense of local excitement and laid a fertile groundwork for the Beatles and the British invasion that would follow. These bands didn't just play music, they ignited a music revolution that set the stage for something even bolder.
I was immediately struck by their music, their beat, and their sense of humour actually on stage. And even afterwards, when I met them, I was struck again by their personal charm. And it was there that really it all started.
It's kind of funny to watch them sit there and do their hair and makeup.
So ferry, cross the Mersey, cross this land.
This is interesting because listening to all these bands, especially the Searchers that were around before the Beatles, they're very Beatle-y. It's as if the Beatles weren't anything special other than their humor on the stage. That's part of the show. That goes a long way towards endearing a band to the crowd. I think it helped a lot.
Jerry and the Pacemakers were the second group, managed by Brian Epstein. Epstein saw potential in their catchy sound and helped guide them in shaping their early career. Under his management, Jerry and the Pacemakers achieved something remarkable. They became the first band to have their first 3 singles reach #1 on the UK charts with How Do You Do It, I Like It, and You'll Never Walk Alone.
I like it, I like the words you say, and all the things you do.
They had 3 #1s? Yeah. Jerry and the Pacemakers had 3 #1s. How Do You Do It, I Like It, and You'll Never Walk Alone. Okay.
I got the hippie shakes.
The Swinging Blue Jeans. Another Merseybeat staple that laid the groundwork for future, heavier sounds.
Great
They
name.
had a 3-year spell of success, rising and falling with Merseybeat itself. The Swinging Blue Jeans had the standard lineup of 2 guitars, a bass guitar and drums, and achieved local fame with their appearances at the Mardi Gras Club and the Cavern Club.
Long Tall Sally. Dave Clark 5.
In January 1964, the Dave Clark Five had their first UK top 10 single, Glad All Over, which knocked the Beatles' I Want to Hold Your Hand off the top of the UK singles chart.
How dare
the second group of the British invasion to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show in the United States. They would ultimately have 18 appearances on the show. The Dave Clark Five were one of the most commercially successful acts of the British invasion, releasing 17 top 40 hits in the US between 1964 and 67.
At the time was a guy called Ted Nibbs. He said, do you fancy going to Liverpool? I went into Liverpool and we walked into a restaurant and Brian Epstein was there. And he said, well, there's no use beating about the bush. I'd like to manage you.
Little children, you better tell on me.
That didn't sound right. Let me hear that again.
Little children, you better tell on me.
Why does that sound bad? It's like the guitar player's playing in 2 and the drums are shuffling.
Tell on me. Hey, all you women, don't come around unless you wait.
So weird. It's so strange because they all sound Beatle-ish, but what made the Beatles rise to the top? From what I'm judging here, excluding everything else I know about them, it seems like it was their crowd talk. They were stand-up comedians.
Of £200 now claims to sell 25,000 copies every fortnight. Its editor, Bill Harry.
When we started Merseybeat 2 years ago, the Beatles were tying the mics to broomsticks. They had long haircuts and rather an untidy form of dress. All over Merseyside, the groups were wearing jeans on stage, were very sloppy, long haircuts. Worst of all, they were actually swearing on stage. So we wrote some editorials. Get your haircut. Don't smoke on stage. Stop swearing. And we found that the groups did take notice. Smart suits on stage, a more professional outlook. And rock and roll became more of a major industry than just a hobby.
So before, the bands were kind of sloppy, they were smoking and cursing. Hey, f*** you! Go f*** yourself! But then after, I think it was Brian Epstein that did that for the Beatles. But this guy's saying he did that for every other band. This guy's a good promoter.
Miss Brown, you've got a lovely daughter.
Another success of the British...
This sounds like someone's making fun of the Beatles.
Miss Brown, you've got a lovely daughter.
You've got a lovely daughter.
Another success of the British invasion, Herman's Hermits. Between March and August 1965
They're
in the
from
United
Manchester,
States,
I think.
Herman's Hermits logged 24 consecutive weeks in the top 10 of Billboard's Hot 100 with 5 singles, including the 2 number ones.
That's really good.
In 1963, the Hollies performed at the Cavern Club, where they were seen by a parlophone producer who offered them an audition and soon signed them. The Hollies started with Merseybeat-style pop harmonies, eventually incorporating edgier rock elements. In 1964,
I've heard that song before. I didn't know that was from back then. She's Not There. The Zombies. I think I've heard a cover of that. Right? Hang on. Show me on Apple Music. Santana? Vanilla Fudge? All right then.
In 1964, the Zombies won a £250 cash prize in a beat group competition sponsored by the London Evening News.
Okay.
They signed a recording contract with Decca and recorded their first hit, She's Not There.
Okay, that's what we just heard. Interesting. The Beatles had a Decca audition and they were denied. How'd that work out for you, Decca?
It peaked at number 12 in the UK, becoming their only UK top 40 hit. The tune
Pretty
began
good.
to catch on in the United States and eventually climbed to number 2.
The way she looked, the way she had tan, the color of her hair, her voice was soft and cool.
But as the decade rolled on, something started to shift. The catchy tunes and harmonies of Merseybeat evolved, turning grittier, harder-edged and more experimental. Fuzzed-out guitars, distorted vocals and pounding rhythms emerged as the next wave of British rock, a sound we now know as Freakbeat. Bands like the Yardbirds, the Pretty Things and The Creation took the upbeat energy of Merseybeat and pushed it into wild, uncharted territory, transforming British rock into a raw expression of rebellion and experimentation. This experimentation can be traced once again to the Beatles. George Martin encouraged them to experiment with complex harmonies, multi-tracked vocals and arrangements that weren't typical of Merseybeat at the time. Martin's classical background and willingness to experiment transformed tracks, giving Merseybeat a polished, dynamic sound that other Liverpool bands hadn't yet explored.
Interesting.
In 1964, while recording I Feel Fine, John Lennon was playing his guitar through an amplifier. During one of the takes, Lennon leaned his guitar against the amp and created a loud, sustained feedback sound, an accident caused by the proximity of the guitar to the amplifier. Instead of scrapping the take or re-recording it, Lennon, along with producer George Martin, found the feedback sound intriguing. The band decided to keep it in the final version of the song. The feedback at the beginning of I Feel Fine is often regarded as the first use of guitar feedback on a pop record, marking a turning point in how rock music approached sound experimentation.
So the story I've heard about that is that the feedback you hear on the recording is not from the take that you hear after the feedback. The story I heard was that the feedback happened and then John said, "Oh, can we put that at the beginning?" So they recorded feedback on its own and then spliced that on to the beginning of the take of the song that they used. So there was some effort. It wasn't like a just happy accident, you know. Also started Jimi Hendrix.
This is Radio Caroline on 199, England's first commercial radio station.
Pirate radio stations like Radio Caroline began broadcasting in 1964 off the coast of the UK, outside British jurisdiction. These stations played rock and roll, R&B, and freakbeat singles that were often ignored by mainstream radio.
What is freakbeat?
Pirate radio gave bands like the Yardbirds, the Pretty Things, and the Who an underground platform to reach audiences who craved edgier music.
Y'all, I did a reaction to a whole thing about pirate radio, and it was fascinating. Check it out if you can. I'll try to remember to put a link, but I usually forget to do that. So just go to my channel and do a search for pirate radio. But what the hell is freakbeat? Freakbeat is a loosely defined subgenre of rock and roll music developed mainly by harder driving British groups during the swinging London period of the mid to late 1960s. The genre bridges British invasion, R&B, beat, and psychedelia. Okay. So it's between Merseybeat, beat, and psychedelia. It got heavier. It's the more hard-edged artists of the British invasion. Much of the material collected on Rhino Records' 2001 box set, compilation Nuggets and Original, can be classified as freakbeat. Let's check that out. Nuggets 2, you say? I wonder if that's on Apple Music. I don't believe it is. Okay.
Freakbeat evolved as a transitional genre between the upbeat, mod-oriented sound of swinging London into the more experimental psychedelic sounds that followed.
That's exactly what Wikipedia just said.
This style acted as a bridge between the polished, danceable sounds of the mod scene and the experimental, consciousness-expanding music of the psychedelic era.
Nice.
Freakbeat songs were typically louder, grittier, and more intense than earlier British pop or mod music. The Yardbirds' changing guitarists, beginning with Eric Clapton contributing to their blues-influenced rock sound, then began to evolve with Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. They began pioneering distortion and feedback central to freakbeat.
Okay.
The Yardbirds' experimentation with freakbeat-style riffs and effects directly influenced psychedelic music.
Okay. This is making sense. Yeah, okay.
The Who are known for their aggressive style. The band's sound evolved from mod to freakbeat with powerful tracks like My Generation.
Okay, that's Freakbeat. All right, you really got me.
The Kinks' loud, distorted guitar riff played by Dave Davies, achieved by a slice he made in the speaker cone of his El Pico amplifier, helped with the song's signature gritty guitar sound. You Really Got Me has been described as a blueprint song in the psychedelic and hard rock arsenal.
Tell you why it's all too beautiful.
The Small Faces began as an influential mod band with catchy beat songs evolving into a more experimental psychedelic band of the late 60s.
Okay.
Similarly, the action began as a mod favourite with their upbeat Motown remakes, and then later evolved into
that was
the
a remake.
psychedelic era with their 1968 experimental masterpiece Brain.
Your brain, it's time to go. You don't have long to go.
I've never heard of Action. Never heard of them. Oh, it's The Action. The band was formed as The Boys. They auditioned for Decca as well. They also got turned down by Decca. They signed to Parlophone with George Martin. Was Land of a Thousand Dances their song? Ah, okay. It's originally by Chris Kinner and Wilson Pickett. Wilson Pickett's the one I've heard. Okay.
The Pretty Things began with R&B and developed a harder sound with fuzz and distortion, moving into Freakbeat.
Oh, that guy's got the hair. Maraca boy. Whoa. The score. Okay.
The Score's 1966 cover of the Beatles' Please Please Me exemplifies the change from Mersey to Freakbeat, using a melodic Beatles Merseybeat song, but with charging drums, the sort of bass playing McCartney used on Revolver, and an in-your-face vocal.
Wow, it's a lot heavier. The Creation. Okay.
The Creation, known for feedback-heavy tracks like Making Time, epitomized Freakbeat's gritty aesthetic.
Don't come any closer. No, knock on hers bread.
Just Four Men was a Merseybeat band that morphed into Wimple Winch, a psychedelic band with the song Rumble on Mersey Square South.
All is peace and quiet in our little town.
I've never heard of these guys.
By 1966, the first overtly psychedelic songs began taking root. The Byrds' 8 Miles High, the Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows, and Pink Floyd's Interstellar Overdrive ushered in a new era of psychedelic themes and experimental sounds, building on the groundwork laid by beat music.
Oh.
Merseybeat's
that Pink Floyd stuff is out there.
Merseybeat's appeal lay in its catchy, pop-oriented melodies and harmonies, which resonated widely with young audiences. As the audiences grew older, Freakbeat took this pop sensibility and amped it up, adding aggressive guitar distortion, heavier beats, and more intense vocal styles. Bands like The Who and The Kinks transitioned from Merseybeat-inspired songs to Freakbeat with tracks that had harder edges, capturing a more rebellious attitude that matched the countercultural mood of the mid-60s. Freakbeat contributed to the development of the British psychedelic movement by normalising experimentalism within popular music.
Okay.
Merseybeat's success demonstrated that British bands could innovate and resonate internationally, while Freakbeat introduced experimental effects, fuzz guitar and distorted sounds that would become central to psychedelic music. Freakbeat's move towards mind-expanding sounds and production techniques built on Merseybeat's appeal, evolving British rock toward a more boundary-pushing direction. This shift marked a departure from beat music's straightforward, pop-oriented sound and made beat music seem comparatively simple and outdated. As the 60s progressed, listeners became interested in deeper, more complex themes around social issues, introspection, and countercultural ideas. Artists responded with lyrics exploring topics like altered consciousness and societal change, making beat music's light-hearted lyrics feel less relevant. Many prominent beat bands evolved beyond the genre.
That's making sense. I just reacted to a video about March 1965, the music scene, and I looked up what was going on at that time. In America, it was all civil rights was in the news. That was when the Selma March happened. Malcolm X went to the UK, I think. I think the Beatles had just put out Help, and their next album was going to be, or no, was it Beatles for Sale? I don't remember, but they were changing. And I have heard that when times are good, when the economy's good, society's happy, people look for nice, realistic pleasantness. And when times are bad, they look for escapism. I feel like the late 60s were, the mid-60s, there was just so much change going on. It's interesting that that was reflected in the music and people's preferences for music. That's amazing.
Hearted lyrics feel less relevant. Many prominent beat bands evolved beyond the genre into freakbeat and a few into psychedelic music. The Beatles, being the most obvious example, moved from their early Merseybeat sound to groundbreaking albums like Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which leaned heavily into psychedelic and experimental territory. This progression was mirrored by other bands, including the Zombies and The Who sought new directions to stay innovative, while other bands simply could not shift with the times. The psychedelic era of LSD and hippie gear clashed with beat music's clean-cut, optimistic image and sound. Before long, many of the Merseybeat bands faded into obscurity along with the beat music scene as swinging London became a mecca for the psychedelic era.
It's getting near dawn.
The Liverpool club scene sparked a movement that still continues to influence and inspire musicians. Bands such as The Strokes infused their garage rock with beat-inspired melodies and rhythms. Catchy songs with beat-influenced hooks helped shape their tight, rhythm-driven sound. A slew of other bands followed suit. The very fact that so many bands continued to emulate the Merseybeat sound is a testament to the powerful influence it had on music and society at large. The beat music scene influenced fashion, hairstyles and attitudes, allowing fans to adopt a visible expression of their musical tastes. This fusion of music and style allowed people to express their identity through their musical preferences. Beat music promoted the idea that self-expression in music didn't have to follow strict conventions. The success of bands writing about what mattered to them encouraged other musicians to explore their creativity freely.
It's crazy that in '64, people were wearing suits and ties. By '66, all these crazy colors, it's just a few years, a couple years, and it's all different.
This fusion of music and style allowed people to express their identity through their musical preferences. Beat music promoted the idea that self-expression in music didn't have to follow strict conventions. The success of bands writing about what mattered to them encouraged other musicians to explore their creativity freely. This led to a culture of self-expression that encouraged individuality and laid the groundwork for the experimentation that developed into other subgenres. Society became much more open than it ever was before once the energy and optimism of beat music swept the world via the Mersey River. Be sure to check out the upcoming video on the psychedelic music scene.
See? Look what John's wearing. That's probably late 1966. And this is probably 1964. Looks like a totally different person. Totally different. That might be 67. Still, wow.
It is painful. I'm feeling guilt-ridden and racked because
psychedelic music scene.
It is painful. I'm feeling guilt-ridden and racked because, you know, what's a record compared with Child? It's nothing. But still, I have to do it. If you think about it, I've been under pressure since I was 21 or 2. That's in public, you know, I mean, that's been very famous. 22 is when I signed the first contract. So I've been producing sort of under pressure for almost 12 years or 15 years. I don't know how long it is, from 1962 up till 1974. That's a long time to be expected to and churning out thousands upon thousands of things. And there comes a point where I don't want to just churn out stuff that's just craft, and even if it was a hit, you know, presuming it was popular, that was just well crafted. Because I'm not interested in being a craftsman. I am a craftsman anyway. I've learnt my trade and my craft. I've been in the studio performing all those years. But I'm not interested in sustaining myself on my past reputation and getting away with it by craftsmanship, like some, let's say, older singers can do that. If you were just a singer, you know, you get to be 50, 60, whatever, and your voice isn't so good, but your stage presence is such that you can, it's not fake it, but you can do certain things that that people sort of, somebody said they saw Elvis, you know. I would never see him, although I worshipped him when he was, before he went in the army and when I was a kid. But I would never go and see him in Vegas or anything like that. I asked a great fan of his, who was Mal Evans, used to work for us. I said, well, what was it like, you know? And he says, well, if you pretended that you were 16, then it was all right. You see, and I don't want to be a person where people have to pretend they're 16 to be able to watch me or to listen to me. And so if that's the way it's going to be, I will do something else, you know.
What else? Had you ever considered doing anything else?
I never considered being a musician in a considered way, you see. I've never taken anything that considered. I had a lot of balls in the air, you know, and when I became a professional musician the day I got a red letter from the art college saying, don't bother coming back next September. Now I'm a professional musician. I got myself to a point where I can live without music. My need is for expression.
Yeah. So
I can
would it have taken another form?
Yeah, probably,
What?
probably.
Writing, painting, acting?
Acting, I'm not interested in.
Not at all.
When I did How I Won the War with Dick Lester in 1966, I mean, regardless of what kind of movie it was, the main lesson I learned was it's best to be the director, because otherwise you're just sitting on your ass all day. But I did write Strawberry Fields while I was sitting on my ass in a desert in Spain. But the acting was absolutely not worth it. You know, I understand it's beautiful when you hit it, but it's not worth it. I would be only interested in directing. Directing costs money. But I'm just as interested in anything that expresses. But still, expression through the music is second nature. Expressing through writing is second nature, and expressing through painting or visuals is second nature to me. Just my craft isn't as good in film or writing. Although the writing I was doing before writing and painting I did before I played music. But it's hard to say before, because I was playing mouth organ and accordion, all sorts when I was a kid, you know, but mainly I thought I was going to be a writer or a painter. So it's the instant satisfaction I need, you know? So it can be expressed in many ways. But, you know, but here I am rocking and rolling, and it's fun. But if it gets not to be fun, I just walk away again, because I know I can walk away now. It's not the be-all and end-all of my life.
Do you think
so I'm going to have fun with it like I did when we first started. So I found myself writing like I first used to write. I didn't think, you know, I wouldn't get all intense about meaningful, meaningless, as Yoko wrote in Grapefruit 100 years ago. You know, all that artsy-fartsy intellectual stuff. Meaningful, meaningless, meaningless, meaningful. You know, so I liberated myself from my own intellect and my own sort of image of myself. So therefore I could write again without consciously thinking about it.
Wow.
Which was a joy, you know.
Wow, yeah. What a great excerpt at the end there. I've thought about that a lot lately, because when I was younger, I did try to be a craftsman. I tried to write songs. I tried to make excellent recordings, you know, craft them. But now what excites me about music is improvising and getting lost in it, you know? That's more fun. That just struck home, what he's saying. So different. And the acting thing, I'm an actor too, if you didn't know. It can be really fun sometimes whenever you actually book a role and you're on set. It's mostly waiting around. And then you're acting for 20 minutes, and then you're waiting around for another few hours while they set up the next thing. Wow, this is crazy. The way this explains it is it was just a natural evolution. And then someone comes along and puts a label on it and says, oh, this is no longer beat music, this is now freakbeat. Oh, now this is psychedelia, you know? But it's all the same thing. It's just evolving through time. Art, life, humanity. Well, y'all be sure to go to Freewheeling and like and subscribe. And if you made it this far in the video, give me a like and subscribe. Well, thank y'all for watching this with me. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon, my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Pick up a mug if you like mugs. I got these mugs here. Anyway, thank y'all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.